So I was done with the upper part of this dress, which is the corset. Now let's move over to the lower part of the dress. I'm going to be attaching a hip part to this. Now this is how I drafted. At the upper part there, that was where I chalked the waist measurement divided by 4. I didn't add any allowance. From the waist measurement, I went down by 7 inches, and that was where I marked the hip. For the hip measurement, I just divided by 4, went down, and I minus 2. You can choose to just minus 1. It depends on how pencil you want it to be. Next thing I did was to connect the waist to the hip and then to the lower part, and this is what we have. The next thing I did is on the waistline there, I measured 2.5, 1 inch for that, and 1.5 for allowance. I kept measuring 1.5 both on the hip till I measured it down. Next is connect from the waistline to the hip and down. I went ahead to measure out my dart. From the middle there, I measured 4 inches and went down by 4.5 inches. Ruled the line from the waist to the 4.5 inches, and on both sides I marked half inches. What I did was to cut it out using the measurement I had already marked. This is another pattern paper, and this is what I'll be using to draft the back of our skirt. First things first, I had to mark out 1.5 inches for our zip allowance. So you just want to place the front on this pattern paper and then you cut it out exactly as I had to label this for easy understanding and for clarity. I placed the front piece on the back piece, and I also needed to chalk out our sewing allowance, which is 1.5 inches. I went ahead to mark our dart the exact same way I did for the front. I had to write down which is the front piece and which is the back piece, but with the zip allowance you should know. That part where I marked our zip allowance, I had to measure out 0.5 and I slanted it. This helped the zip relax. I was done cutting, and this is exactly what we have. Now let's move over to the hip part. The form I'm using for this is just ½ inch. If you want your part to be bigger, then you can go for 1 inch or there. I placed the pattern paper on our crepe fabric and I added ½ inch before cutting. I was done cutting the front piece. Now for the back piece, I just had to place the pattern paper on the fabric. I made sure to cut out that zip allowance area the same way it is on the pattern paper, and then I cut out the fabric. And of course we'll be using a lining for this. I cut it out as well and I reduced the length. So we'll continue in our next vlog on how to sew and attach a hip pad.